Hi everybody, and welcome to the following of MultiSignatureWallet.sol smart contract. And as you can remember from the previous videos, we had a long smart contract to write and we've compiled it successfully in the last part. So now it's time for the deployment of the smart contract. So let's head over to the deploy and run transactions part, and here is where we can deploy the transaction. So there are some tips to consider before deploying it. Here you need to enter an array of 3 addresses or 2 addresses or any number of addresses that you want to put here for testing the smart contract. It's totally up to you how many number of addresses you want to add, because this is a multi-signature wallet. So here you can add any number of addresses, and each addresses are a string, so you need to put the strings inside of one array. And also consider that the required signatures also need to be a number smaller or equal to the number of addresses you provide here. So for example, if there are 3 addresses here, you can put something between 1 to 3 addresses. So the number of addresses shouldn't be 0 and shouldn't be more than the length of this array, which contains the addresses of the owners. So right now I'm gonna write the array. So let's first enter empty strings in an array. So here we can enter a number of addresses from here. So I will copy the first address and paste it over here. So for the next address, I'm gonna choose the second one and copy and paste it over here for the second address instead of the quotation. And for the third address, I'm gonna copy and paste it on the last address over here. So here you can enter the required number of signatures. So it could be 1, 2, or 3. So here I choose, for example, 2. 2 is enough. So now in order to transact the transaction, you need to be either one of these 3 of the owners. So let's create the transaction, and as you can see, it's been successful. Also, let's make this bigger to see the compilation of each one of them, or execution of each one of them. So now let's fund our contract in order to not to have zero balance for our contract, to be able to execute it. So I'm going to do this by adding a number over here. So for example, 10 ways could be enough for paying the gas fees of the transaction. So because this is just a test environment, that's going to be enough, but for future purposes, this amount might not be enough. So it doesn't really matter. We'll copy the address here, paste it, and click on transact. As you can see, it's been funded, and we've got this amount of ether for the balance. So right now, the first step is to create a transaction here in order to get the transaction ID and proceed with the rest of the testing. So here we can add, because we've added 2 signatures necessary, so we need to add 2 signers, right? But the number of owners are 3, so you can choose 2 of the addresses out of the 3 addresses who are the owners. So the first 3 addresses are the owners. I can choose 2 of them. So for example, I choose the first. So like the entrance of the addresses that we had at the beginning of the deployment, we should first we should write it in the format of array of strings. So I will get, for example, the third address, copy it, and paste it over here. Notice that the addresses shouldn't be repetitive, otherwise we'll get the message that the addresses are repetitive, so or are duplicate. So here I can choose an amount, for example 20 and also 20. So again, this is an array and the numbers should be entered this way. Also, let's make sure this is a comma. Yes, this is a comma, and we can choose the address of the recipient, some other address different from these three. So I will choose the fourth one, copy it, and paste it over here. So in order to click on the transaction, before we do that, we need to choose either one of these signers addresses, right? So I will click on this address, the third one, and click transact. As you can see, it's been successful. And here we are able to see the transaction ID, right? If we click on this, we will find the transaction ID inside of our log. So here it is, the transaction ID. We need to copy this because we need it for our future uses. So here is the transaction, execute transaction. But before we do that, we can check these fields for checking the transaction ID status, so that we see what stage of the transaction we are in. So here we can enter the transaction ID and call for get transaction amount. As you can see, it's 40. Why? Because we had two 20s right here, which becomes 40. And so here it's 40, and here again we need to enter a transaction ID for get transaction recipient. Here we will get the address of the recipient, and to check whether it's been approved or not, we need to enter the address and also a number here. So we'll get to that, but here to check whether the address is the owner or not, we can also enter the address. And in order to check if the transaction has been approved, we can paste it over here, call this, and as you can see, it's true, so it's been approved. And to check if the transaction is executed, as you can see, we can click on this, enter the transaction ID, and we will get false. So it's not executed yet, we'll execute it. And in order to get the owners, because we have 3 owners, we will start from 0 up to 2. So the first address is this, the second address is like this, and the third address is like this. So required signatures are 2, just the one we entered at the time of deployment. And transaction amounts, here we can enter, for example, 0 and 1. Okay, we will get to this, but now first let's execute the transaction and execute it with the person who executed the contract. So let me make sure it is the right one. So as you can see, it's been done successfully, so the transaction has been completed. And once I check the transaction is executed again, we'll see that. Okay, let me copy it, paste it again. And call, so transaction must have been executed then. So this should become true, but I'm not sure why it is false still. But let's click transact again. So it's been successful. Let's take a look at the log here and see if it is pending. So I don't think it is, so let's proceed with the rest of the contract. So here we can copy the transaction ID again. Let's find it. Oh, it's here. Copy it. It's transaction executed. Call, and this should be true, but not sure why it's getting false here. So anyway, let's check this one again. So I did try this a couple of more times, and luckily here this is true. So once I click on the transaction and transact the transaction, then we will be able to see true at on here. So if I call this, then you will be able to see true. So you can do this once again and again. I have tested this event before, and don't worry about this part. This is not related to code. It's totally up to you to copy and paste the numbers correctly and do this in an order. So here we have checked all of the functions and calls and also the transactions. So they've all been successful. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and until the next one, goodbye.